Mencia's a horrible human being.
He won't take responsibility, and he has no friends because he's an asshole.
Hey, everyone talks shit about you. Nobody likes you. You talk shit. Everyone does.
In today's video, I'll be summarizing exactly how and why Carlos Mencia was canceled by his peers in comedy, so let's get right into it. I'll begin with a brief summary of Carlos Mencia's career leading up to his cancellation. Carlos rose the comedy ranks throughout the 1990s and early 2000s with multiple stand-up specials, a lead role in a Super Bowl commercial, and even his own TV show, The Mind of Mencia, which aired for 64 episodes from 2005 to 2008. In the public eye, Carlos Mencia was a talented comedian near the top of the comedy world, but behind the scenes, from the beginning of his career, there were things boiling underneath the surface that caused resentment towards Carlos in the comedy scene. So let's talk about why resentment was building towards Carlos Mencia. The first key factor, which I'll spend a lot of time on in this video, is that Carlos Mencia has repeatedly faced allegations of being a joke thief. The second key factor is that Carlos was guilty of consistently bumping other comedians. These two key factors eventually led to a 2007 spectacle involving Joe Rogan, which I'll talk about later in this video. But first, let's talk about the allegations of Carlos Mencia being a joke thief. Now, joke theft is kind of a gray area and is difficult to prove with 100% certainty, and I'll give you a few reasons why. In the context of Carlos Mencia, when he was in his prime in the 1990s and early 2000s, smartphones didn't exist. If he was stealing material in some random comedy club in Kentucky or Ohio or wherever it was, it is extremely unlikely that A, it would have been recorded, and B, that it would reach the comedian who he was stealing from. Additionally, a joke thief might not steal an entire joke word for word, but they might lift bits and pieces, telling someone else's joke in their own way. This is the idea of stealing a premise, and this does make it more complicated to prove if someone is a joke thief.
This is the thing that kills me. Carlos is taking fucking your life's analogies, man.
Another example of why joke theft is difficult to prove is that it's entirely possible that a comedian might subconsciously steal material without being aware of it.
Sometimes people just got sponge brains, and you see a bit that you think is funny, and then you add a couple tags to it, and a few days later, you don't remember that you saw the bit, you just remember what you added to it, and it's your bit.
He was one of those guys that would sit in back of the comedy club and watch other comics, and like, what I think happens, man, is subconsciously, whether you're trying to do it or whether you're not trying to do it, you're gonna pick up material, man.
As recently as 2021, Carlos has denied that he subconsciously absorbed any material.
Could it be a case where you are formulating a joke out of that thing that you didn't actively listen to?
It's hard to believe that would have been the case.
But interestingly, in a 2010 interview with Marc Maron, Carlos admitted that it's possible he may have absorbed material from headliners in the past.
Is there a chance that you absorbed this shit?
With openers, no. With headliners, possibly.
You qualified that by saying headliners maybe.
Maybe I absorbed something from watching a headline that made me go, oh, fuck, you know what I mean?
Because I know.
Wow.
Even though joke theft is difficult to prove with 100% certainty, when there's smoke, there's fire. And with Carlos Mencia, there's a lot of smoke surrounding him being a joke thief.
I found it odd that he never had a notebook, and he had hours of material.
He never got into writing, ever. I used to go over his house and I used to say, hey man, let's write. And then we wouldn't write.
He faced allegations of being a joke thief from the very beginning of his career and very consistently throughout his career.
At the Comedy Store, I would hear, hey man, Eddie Griffin's pissed at you. They said that there was a bit that I do that you did, or Mooney.
I would walk up to Eddie and go, hey, Eddie, I heard you said this. Hey, Mooney. Like Mooney, I went up to Mooney more than once and said, somebody said that you did a joke about this. I do this joke. I almost got in a fight sometimes because of that. One of them was with Lopez.
He's had that reputation his entire career. So, I mean, that must mean something.
A lot of allegations towards Carlos have been made public on various podcasts and radio interviews.
He steals from everyone, whether it's George Lopez or Paul Mooney or old Richard Pryor albums.
Well, you know, the guy was pretty liberal with some of the material, you know. We counted 13 minutes of my material on.
First he tells me the idea, and then that night he does like 20 minutes on that subject, and I'm like,
this guy's amazing. Then I'm watching Comedy Central and I realize that it's a Jim Gaffigan bit.
A lot of your material was a little too similar to Paul Mooney or Bill Hicks or, you know, like the Bill Cosby bit.
The way that he would put it was, you know, like he would take a joke from me, I'd come up with a premise and I'd pitch it to him, and then he would do it on stage and he'd go, bro, you work for me. I pay you.
So you would pitch jokes that you were working on for yourself?
For myself. And before he knew it, it was gone. It was no longer mine. You know, he would go, look, man, I pay you week in, week out. I'm your income.
And perhaps the most damning allegation towards Carlos is that he allegedly stole material from Freddie Soto only 1 week after Freddie's passing, which is just incredibly sad.
Freddie Soto was a great Latino comic who died very young, and it was, from what I understand, an incredible burden on him that Carlos seemed to be taking his material.
It was frustrating for Freddie, who was trying to make that next jump in his career, and here's Mencia using his material on Mind of Mencia to continue to make more and more money.
And what happened after Freddie died?
Freddie died, and like a week later, Mencia was doing Freddie's bits verbatim on stage.
Again, just incredibly sad, and what's even more sad is that Carlos completely brushed this off and denied that this even happened.
A week after he died, you went on stage with his jokes.
That's not true, man. I mean, listen, I met Freddie out of love, man.
I'm sure after all of this info that I've provided so far, you can understand why Carlos Mencia was very much resented by other comedians, but as surprising as it is, joke theft isn't the only reason why Carlos Mencia was hated. And now it's time to talk about the second key factor that led to his cancellation, which is him consistently bumping other comedians. In the world of comedy, bumping is when a more established comedian cuts in front of newer comedians, performing long sets, bumping these newer comedians' performances into later in the night, or completely taking them out of the lineup, giving them no stage time in that evening. Bumping used to be more common when Carlos was an up-and-coming comic, but has become more taboo in recent years.
I wasn't bothered by going on long because I was like, you know how many times this has been done to me? I couldn't wait to bump people, bro.
I know the behavior, though, that behavior after you guys left ended. We don't have that culture anymore.
I came in at a time when hazing was no good anymore.
So you're saying that you do it out of spite?
Yeah. I do.
You had some lessons to teach.
Yeah, man. I gotta get all these demons out.
Out of spite, Carlos Mencia became a serial bumper, even though he knew how bad it felt when he was the one being bumped as an up-and-coming comic.
Mencia or Eddie Griffin or some of these guys, they would do 3 or 4 hours on stage.
What?
Yeah.
Here's the kind of guy he is. My first week ever to headline at the Ontario Improv. Mencia shows up right before I go on stage. He goes, hey, I want to go up, do a few minutes. He walks on stage and does 2 hours.
One time I was doing the Improv, I was headlining, and you came and bumped me and did like 45, 50 minutes.
I had this rule with Carlos that if he did over 30 minutes, I wasn't going up, because that to me is a headliner spot. Yeah. People are like, okay, we saw the headliner, let's go the fuck home.
Now I see that this is a pattern, that, you know, you bump headliners and you do an hour to 2 hours.
Imagine all the people that Mencia bumped. I mean, everyone that's big now was the people that he bumped for years that made them hate the man.
With all of the negative energy surrounding Carlos Mencia due to him bumping comedians and stealing material, word about his reputation spread rampantly among his peers in comedy.
Lopez basically told me, he goes, look, Mencia's a horrible human being, and you shouldn't go with him.
He won't take responsibility, and he has no friends because he's an asshole.
Freddie Soto would go, bro, don't trust this guy. Bro, watch what you tell him.
Once you reach a level of success, if you don't have a conscience about what you've done to other people, it's done. Right. There's no unfucking it.
All of this hate was bound to boil over, and all it would take was one catalyst for Carlos Mencia to be cancelled. So now we can finally talk about that critical 2007 event when all of a sudden Joe Rogan entered the chat. In the 1990s to mid-2000s, long before the mainstream success of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, Joe was just a comedian/TV commentator who was a regular at the Comedy Store in LA. In the mid-90s, Joe and Carlos were actually friends until Joe noticed that Carlos was stealing jokes and called him out about it privately. Carlos denied this allegation to Joe, and at that point, their friendship was over. Joe's allegation about Carlos being a joke thief came to a front on February 10th, 2007, when he famously confronted Carlos on stage at the Comedy Store in front of a full audience. Joe was actually performing that night, and when he finished up his set, he was introducing the next comic.
So he introduces him as, oh, this guy works with Carlos Mencia. And I was just fucking sick of the shit.
Joe got off stage and Mencia chest bumped him. and then got on stage and grabbed the mic from the next comedian and just started going off on Rogan. And then Rogan got on stage, and that's how the whole thing started.
Brian Redban filmed the entire interaction, so here are some of the highlights from that altercation.
Important enough that he had to end the show by saying Carlos Mencia stealing. It's easy to say you steal shit. Every time you open your mouth, you talk about me. I think that you're secretly in love with me because you can't shut the fuck about me.
After a little bit of time, an MVP passes Joe a mic, and it's about to get real in here.
Why would it matter to you?
Why the fuck would it matter?
Why would it matter to you? Here's the deal.
You are a good performer. You do very well with other people's shit.
I do well with my shit. I've never stole
George Lopez didn't grab you by your fucking neck and slam you up against the Laugh Factory wall for ripping off his shit. You ain't still special?
He did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
You did another joke the other day. I saw you do a joke about licking the asshole. It's like licking a battery. I saw a guy do it in Vegas. I go, well, that's where he got it from. The Reverend Bob Levy from the Howard Stern Show.
After the on-stage altercation, apparently Carlos tried to finish his set, but the crowd kind of turned against him.
Mitzi Shore called up and told him to get off stage. It was that bad.
That's really humiliating.
And then the crowd was just booing, and it was like 30 comics in the back of the room going, nah, 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 nah,
wow.
hey, goodbye.
Wow.
Once everyone was off stage, Brian Redban was still filming while there were more allegations coming against Carlos.
Oh, you got no comedian friends. Hey, everyone talks shit about you. Nobody likes you. You talk shit. Everyone does. You probably don't even think you steal jokes. You're probably like O.J. Simpson. You're probably running around thinking you didn't do it. You're probably crazy. Are you?
Maybe I am.
What is it?
I don't know.
Have you seen him steal material?
I have seen him steal orange.
You steal jokes? What, are they all making it up? You guys steal jokes? I didn't take shit, bro. Yeah, how weird is that?
At the end of the night, Brian Redban went home and edited the video, releasing it in the early hours of the next morning.
Uploaded it and then went to sleep and then woke up and had already had like millions of hits.
And then Carlos threatened to sue. So YouTube banned all my accounts. We got banned from the Comedy Store, and then Joe's managers dropped him. It got intense fast.
Even though Joe was banned and Carlos was welcome to perform at the Comedy Store, something changed after this altercation. The Comedy Store stopped feeling like home to Carlos because now that his reputation was very public, comedians had no reason to try to save face around him, and he really picked up on the vibe that no one liked him. In the months and years following this altercation with Joe Rogan, Carlos Mencia would perform at the Comedy Store and other big comedy clubs less and less, putting his cancellation into effect. In summary, Carlos's serial joke theft and bumping resulted in him developing a really poor reputation among his peers in comedy. Despite this reputation, he remained prominent in the comedy scene for years until eventually his past caught up to him in that critical 2007 altercation with Joe Rogan. Stay tuned for a follow-up video where I will be talking about why, all these years later, Carlos Mencia hasn't recovered from his cancellation. If you enjoyed today's video, definitely make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my future content. But anyways, that's going to be it for me today, everybody, so take it easy. Peace.